You're listening to the I Love You Keep Going podcast with George Haas. For more information, please visit our website at www.mettagroup.org. That's www.mettagroup.org.
So welcome, everybody. This is I Love You Keep Going. It's Thursday, May 1st, 2025. It's 7:49 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. And I thought that I would talk a little bit tonight about the idea of what would a daily practice be that would push you toward earned security. Could be anything, right? All of the different things that need to happen. Archimedes said that, give me a place to put my fulcrum and I can move the earth, which meant if you could put it on Mars and the lever was long enough, he could push the earth. And attachment conditioning or your attachment strategies are really stable. They do shift if you do the right thing, if you put the right pressure on, but if you don't, they remain pretty stable. And so we talk about it as a three-pillar approach to change it. One is the ideal parent figure protocol, which we use to remap the perceptual database so that there are entries in the database that you can use to create conceptual reality from that are different than what your original conditioning was. So you have the capacity to sense an object which can be sensed when there's contact. Consciousness of the sensing experience arises. It's evaluated for urgency. Does it need immediate attention? Does it not matter if you ever get to it? Is there time for a pleasant experience? It forms a queue of mind moments. And when a mind moment gets to the top of the queue, it's compared to the perceptual database of previously defined experiences. We don't really live in a world of what happens. We live in a world of what happens means to us. And when those mind moments get to the top of the queue, if there's an entry in the perceptual database that matches closely enough, the whole meaning thread attaches. And so we live in this present moment experience, which is also informed by everything that's happened to us that we've categorized or patterned in that same way. Part of that process of forming conceptual reality is then an understanding of all of the choices that are available in the next moment. Conditionality, we call that. We make our intention, we form our action, we take the action, that is to say, we choose one of those possibilities. As soon as we do, all of the possibilities except the one we chose disappear and we roll into that experience of the next moment and also see what happens based on what choice we make, gather that data, and then that process repeats endlessly. It's that paradox of existence. Each moment is completely fleeting and disappears, and there's an eternity of those moments in the life. So we have both of those. If we can remap the perceptual database, we can assign different meanings to the habit of choosing. Samsara is really this experience of when all of the choices that open before us are selectively understood, and we repeat over and over again the ones that we recognize and discard the ones that we don't. To come out of that, of course, we have to be able to see and evaluate all of the choices and choose differently, which is the remapping of that perceptual database. And the question is always, of course, we do a visualization using ideal parent figure. We create these entirely imaginary scenarios which are in the database, which we can then use to create the experience of reality in the present moment. But then we actually have an experience of reality which has not been imagination based, and that's gathered and remembered and stored in the database. So we gradually build up from an entirely imaginary experience to one that's actually lived. The second piece is the mentalizing piece. The mentalizing piece is where we can track fast enough the process of making these realities and adjust them if we need to, moving from insecure or disorganized attachment into secure attachment. So the cognitive piece, of course, is to understand what that is. What is secure attachment and how does that function? And then in each moment, recognize that process of choice that we're making. And if we choose over and over again the insecure, disorganized attachment, we can adjust that and make a secure choice. There is always the possibility of doing the cognitive side of understanding what secure functioning is, and then negotiating in relationships secure agreements without doing the deep work of uprooting your native attachment strategy. And sometimes it's necessary to make those agreements first and then do the deep work. You make agreements with people to be supportive and encouraging so that you have the fortitude, that is the support to undertake the deep work of uprooting the native attachment strategy and replacing it. In the mentalizing frame, what we're really talking about is to understand the way in which we define the reality of the moment or the view of the moment. So that process, as each of the mind moments reaches the top of the queue and we assign meaning to it, we have a sense that we are in the present moment and that we've assigned this meaning thread to it and have some awareness of the content of that meaning thread. Then we want to understand what about that we want to express to someone else. We really are meant to be in relationship with other people. And in the people close to us, we want to be able to present a complete and authentic representation of our experience to them. Not everybody is someone who we're obligated to make an authentic presentation. But if you're unwilling to do that with anyone, the loneliness of that tends to be unbearable for most people. If you don't allow yourself to be seen and known, you don't really ever have the sense of being acceptable. And that anxiety arises in the sense that if they discovered who you were, they could abandon you. Whereas if you allow people to really see you clearly and completely, and they stick around, that anxiety that if they discover who you really are, they would leave you, doesn't really happen. You settle into it, into that stable connection. So understanding how it is that we've made the present moment, understanding what about that you want to communicate to somebody, but then also understanding that you have your conditioning and they have their conditioning. And so we need to transliterate our understanding of things sometimes so that it matches their understanding of things, so that we can be effective in communicating to them. We make the expression and then we gather their response to our expression and ensure carefully that we understand what they mean. This process of making the expression and gathering their response to it is where a lot of conflict arises in relationships, because we're not actually effective in communicating what we wanted them to know, and then we don't understand how they respond to it. Once we gather their response to it and really understand it, then we can modify our understanding of the agreements between us so that we're continuously in relationship and in agreement and have the consents and are offering the consents that we need to. in addition to that capacity for mentalizing, there's also the emotional regulation piece. The difficulty of emotional regulation uh, as a solo project is that we're often in a situation where our emotional dysregulation exceeds our capacity to regulate ourselves. And if we haven't carefully placed around ourselves relationships that are regulating, well, the level of dysregulation can be unbearable. But if you do take the time, energy, and resources to gather relationships which you can use for regulation, you have the capacity to take bigger risks in your exploration. The third pillar is understanding the nature of collaborative relationships and building enough relationships so that you have support for your primary exploration. In my society, but I think of culture as the big container, and we each participate in these smaller societies that we gather around ourselves, and those smaller societies fit into bigger societies until they're contained in the broader culture. We need to have people around us who are regulating so that we can risk primary exploration. A lot of us do not have the time, energy, and resources at hand simply to engage in our primary exploration. So then we also have to engage in a secondary exploration, which is the gathering of time, energy, and resources. But once you have enough, then you can begin to explore for meaning, taking risks to find out the things that provide a sense of purpose in your life. And without that, of course, we enter into a place of despair and the lack of purpose, and the difficulty of the human condition can then become overwhelming. What gets you out of bed in the morning? Or do you even get out of bed is the question at the other end of it, when there's a complete lack of purpose and a timidity about discovering it. It's hard to engage much. Insecure and disorganized people often, as they age, um, become discouraged by the difficulties of managing these things and withdraw from life and, in some sense, wait it out. It accumulates the difficulties. So understanding the nature of collaborative relationship, what kind of agreements to make with other people so that you're supported and encouraged in the way that you need. All you have to do to have that is to trade support and encouragement for their lives, and find enough time, energy, and resources on each day to pursue some aspect of primary meaning. Otherwise, of course, the creeping despair grabs you by the ankles and pulls you underground. Um, there isn't this possibility of just waiting for it to go by without that despair getting at you. And so this movement between really pursuing the sense of meaningfulness in life and the despair of not being able to do it. So how then on each day do you support this shift from insecure or disorganized attachment to secure functioning? Ideal parent figure work one-on-one is best done with a facilitator. And so that also can be resource intensive. And you can adjust the schedule of that based on what is available. The meditation practice to develop mentalizing and emotional regulation is available to you to practice. And that, I think, is a useful a strategy to engage in developing the capacity to mentalize through meditation and also emotional regulation. In addition to that, often we find ourselves in the insecure and disorganized categories as having self-esteem, which is not ideal, a negative representation of self, sometimes even a negative representation of other people, which needs to be overcome. And this is through the heart practices, loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. And a lot of it so that we tilt the working model of ourselves onto the positive side of things. We create, and this goes all the way back to the very beginning, these working models of other people, which are a collection of gists, we call them. Gists is think of it as a setting in the body-mind system. The gist goes off, the body changes into the setting of the gist, and then we experience the body-mind in the same way that we experience. We're experiencing it when we made the memory, and then we recreate in the present moment the experience of the past. It's not the most accurate representation that we create because we don't have the same body we had when we made the memory, even if it's a few weeks later, still a different body. But if it's decades later, how do you experience a child's memory in the body mind that you have now? There was no cognitive capacity at the adult level in the child's experience. The body's very different. And so we create these facsimiles based on our current conditioning. Of course, each time we create the representation, it's remembered. And so you have the original plus each time you've remembered it. So quite different than what actually happened. In the development of these working models, then the working models are really a collection of gists that activate and create a pattern, which we recognize to be ourselves or we recognize to be other people. It's fuzzy logic, if you know the computer term. The processing capacity of the human brain is so slow that if we actually operated on something that was a sharp representation, we wouldn't be able to recognize anyone else. We wouldn't be able to recognize ourselves fast enough. And so we have these fuzzy modeling. I mean, each time you see somebody, they're wearing different clothes, their hair might be different, they might be older. And so we sort of have that sense of them rather than an accurate representation of them. The body-mind, although is stunningly amazing in its capacities, is also limited in ways. When the pattern of the gists activate and it's largely negative conditioning that you're experiencing, then the sense of self arises, but it's largely a negative experience. And it's easy to develop an aversion to the experience of self arising. And that aversion toward the experience of self is the root of self-hatred. And in order to change that, we have to load up that working model with positive gists so that when the patterning erupts, it falls on the positive side of things. That positive sense of self activating is the root cause of self-love. And this is also true of other people in the creating of these working models. So in terms of daily practice, what you can do is the Metta Vipassana practice around the developing of mentalizing and emotional regulation, and then the heart practices around the development of a positive self sense, and then also positive self senses of other people that were important. If you come from adverse conditioning, you often develop a negative working model of your caregivers or your siblings, your family. And those too can be adjusted to a more positive sense. What we want to do is come out of that child view of the good caregiver, the bad child, into seeing accurately who our caregivers were and how that affected us. Then that decision tree that comes from that, all of the decisions that we made over time based on our conditioning that have led us to where we are now, so that we can begin to adjust not what happened to us, but what the meaning of what happened is. That's adjustable, not actually what happened. We can begin to see clearly our caregivers for who they were and what their capacities were at the time, understand how that affected us and led us into the decisions that we made. And in some sense, what that does is allow us to experience from the caregiver uh, uh, their capacity to love us. Now, I do like to make a distinction between helpless or haplessly engaged parenting that was really unskillful and sadistic parenting, which was intentional, the intentional causing of harm to the child. So we're going to set aside the sadistic parenting and talk about the hapless parent who intended well for their children and did the best that they could in each of those moments that they needed to respond, so that we can see that and experience that as an expression of care and love from them. It's so important in the human condition that we experience that. The child so necessarily needs to feel a sense of being loved and valued by their caregivers, even if the caregivers were unskillful in the way that they managed that. Sadistic parenting is something different, where the caregiver harms the child because they get uh, um, I hesitate to say off on it, but it provides for them something that they need. Um, there's a question about whether or not there was a sense of caring at all, and also a sense of whether it's repairable at all. So that's the practice side. In the practical sense of being in relationship to people, we need to negotiate agreements that are beneficial to both people in the relationship. And we need to be able to risk expressing ourselves authentically. Now, in Robin Dunbar's research, he categorized that as above and below the line. Some people you have agreements with that are in place that have demonstrated that they're trustworthy, so that you are obligated to tell them uh, or to give them an authentic, complete representation of your experience. But most relationships are not like that. And so there is no obligation to be completely authentic to people where you don't have an agreement with them for that, and where they also have not demonstrated that they're trustworthy in receiving something so valuable that they'll take care of it. But for people that you have close to you, which is, pretty essential, to be seen, to be known, to feel accepted, to feel delighted in, and to feel that they're reliable, so you don't have to worry about whether they'll be available to you when you need them, is essential to security, but also essential to effective exploration. And without that, of course, we begin to curtail the risks that we're willing to take that might be emotionally dysregulating because we don't have anyone to help us. We get so dysregulated we can't regulate ourselves. That all makes sense. So the daily practice, of course, is evaluating the terms of the relationship and then beginning or continuing to be as authentic as you can be in the relationship. One of the barometers of whether you're oversharing, of course, is if you feel exposed and under threat because of what you've shared. So in a secure relationship where the agreements are pretty solid, that wouldn't happen. And there is, of course, the consent piece. People have to consent to be given these authentic expressions. Christian.
George, do you think that there might be a kind of natural like easing into, or like if people are not used to sharing, even something that might be okay will still feel like oversharing until they kind of get used to it?
Well, I think that there's a normalizing process for a lot of things that happen to people. You know, you grow up in a family system where the terms of what's acceptable and what isn't acceptable is defined, but it's not so overtly defined that we have a sense of what it is. It's just what happens in the family and how it's reacted to. So there are some things that you could feel are quite shameful and would be considered quite shameful in your family system when you take them into a broader context of other family systems do not have the same valuation to it. So there's a normalizing process, I think, that happens. I think that if you've spent a long time in pretend mode or in idealizing mode, where you don't really ever share authentically, the experience of it always produces an intense abandonment terror in the beginning, and then often produces a sadness at the times in the past when you weren't able to express yourself authentically and wanted to or needed to. But when you do that and see how the other person responds, if they respond in a good way, it opens that up, and so you're less likely to have that on repeat endlessly. The group that tends to be the biggest in oversharing are disorganized people. They have a tendency to overvalue kindness, and so somebody could make an ordinary expression of kindness, but because they're used to a childhood of such great cruelty, any expression of kindness has this huge value to it. And because they're used to keeping themselves so hidden, open up, mistaking the kindness for consent, and then recoil because they, at a certain point, recognize that the kindness was not the same as consent for intimacy, or feel vulnerable, that they could be harmed by it. So it's incremental, you know, you go little bit, little bit, little bit. You offer a little bit of trust to somebody and see how they do. And if they do well, you offer them a little bit more. And if they don't, you don't offer them anymore. That's that process of slowly engaging in intimacy, which is based on not longing to have somebody who is good with your intimacies, but somebody who demonstrates that they are. And usually that takes time to do because people can maintain an artificial representation for short periods of time, but not usually long periods of time. Is that making sense? Somebody who sees you as valuable, who delights in your beingness without having to really do anything. And somebody who's curious about your exploration is really the fertile ground to develop relationships. Somebody who's regulating for you. So we practice on a daily basis the control of the flow of intimate expression, engaging people that we think would be useful to us in terms of the support for our exploration, and offer them intimacy and see how they respond, right? They have to consent to it. They may not have room for another intimate relationship. They may not have the capacity to do it. And we need to discover that not through words, but through actions over time. And then if you find somebody who is good with who you are and interested in your exploration delights and the way that you are, your beingness, and has the capacity to hold space, then you flow more energy into those relationships. In collaborative relationships, of course, the overall agreement is that you take care of them in the way that they need to be taken care of, and they take care of you in the way that you need to be taken care of, and you collaborate with each other so that you show them how the care needs to be expressed. And then, of course, you have to have the capacity to express it. And if you don't have the capacity to express it in the way that they need, that you collaborate on discovering a way that you do have the capacity to do that will provide for them the sense of care that they need, and then they're willing to collaborate with you to find ways that you can feel connected and cared for. And this does not mean that people who can't do it are not, you don't continue to be in relationship to them. You just don't offer them the same level of time, energy, and resources, the same level of intimacies. You have them at a greater distance where there's less exchange. So that's the main piece. Each day, as you engage in relating to other people, you express yourself authentically. As I like to say, in order to express yourself authentically, you have to be willing to be abandoned. And in order to express yourself completely authentically, you have to be willing to be completely abandoned. And so there's also attending to the garden of your social network so that you don't run out of connections. So there's always some support as you cultivate additional relationships. In the Dunbar research, he said that most people lose a significant relationship every 2.5 years, which means through attrition alone, you get into your adult life and you could run out of people that you're intimate with if you're not constantly cultivating and replacing intimate relationships. Not just romantic, of course, we're talking about the friend group that you keep around you. When you're younger and you're in school and you're running around, you meet a volume of people that you don't meet later in life. It's one of the reasons it gets challenging. And you read over and over again the terrible loneliness of old age when you've lost all of your intimate connections, which doesn't mention that you haven't been cultivating them all the way along. Old age starts at 55. In our youth-obsessed culture, it's very hard for people to grasp the biology of it. I was digging around recently, and the World Wide Web said that 65% of people who make it into their 60s make it into their 70s. No, that's wrong. 65% of people who make it into their 70s make it into their 80s. So it didn't elaborate on how many people who are born make it into their 60s. But 4% of people who make it into their 80s make it into their 90s. So there's a drop off. And so you can find yourself, even if you've been able to maintain lifelong relationships, a loss of them. I remember talking to my grandmother, Blanche, who said, I just don't know anyone anymore. And I said, oh, there's lots of people around you. You have the people you play bridge with, you have the people that you go to the garden club with. And she looked at me and said, oh, those people, I've only known those people 10 years. I used to know people 70 years. And so there's also that piece of carrying relationships forward. I know last fall I was in New York and I found myself having dinner with people a whole table of people I'd known for 40 years. It was quite astonishing, the depth of the knowledge of each other's lives and the variations of all of that. And what stuck with different people about the shared experiences they had. Quite a stunning thing that comes with that capacity. And at the same time, relationships are coming and going. And so you're pulling people in so that you're always within a range of people that are able to regulate you. And this really then is the last thing I'll say, is you need to be pushing into your primary exploration really on a daily basis, couple of hours, few hours a day, oriented toward the pursuit of what's meaningful to you, what you find makes your life purposeful. Because without that, particularly as you age and the physical capacities of the body diminish and the breadth of your social network, particularly the long term aspects of it, shortens. Without that purpose to push you through all of those resistances, it can be quite daunting, the experience of that part of life. Is that all making sense? So your daily practice, your heart practice, your exploration, and the gathering and maintaining of your social network is really the formula for moving into security if you're coming from a place of insecure, disorganized attachment. Of course, if you're secure, it is just obviously, when we talk about groups, the elements apply to everybody in the group, but we are always pulling out individual examples to contradict the quality of the group. But when I talk about secure people, that tends to be the way that life has always been. And so they always engage in that. It's for those of us who didn't learn that early on that are learning it now that we need to be more intentional about it. So what do you say we do a little bit of practice? What would you like to do? Okay, let go of the meditation. So let's see here. How'd that go? Good. Hi. Waiting for my calendar to populate so I can tell you what's coming up. We're going to do a level 1 starting on May 17th. slightly compressed from the way we used to do it into 3 Saturdays. We're going to do a retreat on June 21st, which is a Saturday, which is the exploration retreat. That I like to think of it as an intermediate mentalizing retreat around primary exploration. And then we'll do this Saturday, the second Saturday, an exploration half day on advanced mentalizing, in some sense, the pursuit of awakening in a spiritual sense, but I might also talk about the pursuit of what a primary exploration might be. I like to use my photography for that. So, talk about that. And then let's see here. Kaleidoscope, obviously, we're doing monthly. And then we're going to start a level 2 on Thursdays, July 3rd. That's what's coming up. So take a look at that. It's up on the calendar. Nice to see you. Nice to have you practice. I offer the teaching freely, but I do hope if you have resources and you're able, you'll support us by making a donation. Any amount is appreciated. Help supports me and the work we're doing at Mettagroup. Thank you, and we'll see you soon. Bye.